You're hanging out after hours with Matt Anderson, presented by Inside the Gamecocks.
Welcome into the Late Night Gamecock Show. I am your host, Matt Anderson. So happy to be here with everyone tonight, July 23rd, 2024. July has flown by. June has flown by. The summer has flown by. I mean, kids are going back to school soon. Thankfully, here in Florence, we're getting a lot of rain. We've needed it. It's been really dry lately. My yard is desperate for some rain. But Alex Jones, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. You mentioned all that, how the summer's flying by, but that means we're getting closer and closer to football season.
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, I think we're, 9 or 10 days away from fall practice starting. We're only, 30-something days away from the very first football game of the season against Old Dominion. We're coming up on the Olympics. I mean, got a lot going on. Politics in our country is going crazy right now.
Yeah.
I mean, just stick to sports, y'all. Just stick to sports. We'll try not to do any politics on this show. But Alex, so are you a big Olympic guy? Do you like watching the Summer Olympics, the Winter Olympics? What's your jam?
Yeah, I like watching Olympics. I'd say I probably like the Winter Olympics more than Summer Olympics, but I'm here for all of it.
Yeah, we're all here for curling. I swear.
Yeah,
curling's the best.
There you go. That's what I like about the Winter Olympics is curling.
Yeah, when I was a little kid, I used to love watching snowboarding and skiing. That just seemed so cool to me. And Shaun White was like my favorite athlete in the world because he could just do 1080s and had the video game on the 64. But anyway, Alex, University of South Carolina actually has. Let me double check that count. Actually, what's your guess, Alex? How many Olympians do you think the University of South Carolina has this go around?
I'll say 11.
You're really, really close. The answer is 14, and they're actually tied with Notre Dame. Which university do you think has the most Olympians in the Summer Olympics coming up next week?
Is it an SEC school?
No, it's out west. The top two are out west.
UCLA or USC or Southern Cal.
All right. So Southern Cal is number 2. They have 44 Olympians. Stanford has 51.
Stanford.
As far as tops in the SEC, that is Florida with 40. And then Texas has 30, LSU 28, Tennessee 27. Arkansas, which is weird to me, has 23. And then you get down to Kentucky and Georgia. Kentucky has 16. Georgia has 15. And South Carolina's tied with Notre Dame for 14th most Olympians. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of interesting to think about, because obviously the track and field team is just unbelievable at South Carolina. And I knew they were going to have some women's basketball players because, I mean, that's all Dawn Staley does, is just produce the best basketball players in the world at South Carolina. So the women's basketball team actually has 3 Olympians and only 1 on the U.S. team. Can you guess who that might be, Alex?
Asia Wilson.
That is correct. That is correct. Letitia Amiri, I'm always bad at pronouncing the last names, and Shea Colley are with Canada on the basketball side. Julia Vincent is representing South Carolina and South Africa in diving. Then you have Nana Korsets Madsen, a golfer at South Carolina. She's representing Denmark. Sabrina D'Angelo is representing Canada in soccer, but her Olympic sport is actually football. I guess that's what they call it. I don't know.
Interesting.
Then you got 2 swimmers, Tatiana Salkayatan and Tomas Parabonio. That is Moldova and Ecuador. And then Fernando Saraundolo, tennis for Argentina. And then track and field. You got 2 representing America, Rachel Glenn and Quincy Hall. And then Eric Favors is representing Ireland. Anas Asiyai is representing Morocco. And Alea Abrams is representing Guyana. So, yeah, Craig is in the chat box. I could never be a Jeopardy host. I swear I'm not dyslexic. I don't know what it is, but I cannot pronounce names to save my life. But Olympics are coming. Summer Olympics are coming. South Carolina is going to have 14 representatives. That's really awesome. We'll be cheering for all of them unless they're playing America, and then we'll be pulling for America. Sorry, South Carolina Olympians, but America first. But anyway, so lots going on right now, Alex. I mean, looking at South Carolina football right now, we have a number of upcoming commitment dates. Obviously, 4-star wide receiver Malik Cook is Thursday. Do you know if anyone from the Big Spur is planning to attend that press conference, Alex?
I believe possibly. Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. So, I love the press conferences. I think it's the most fun thing in high school recruiting. I love watching people pick up a hat, throw a hat down, take the shirt off, and then there's a Gamecock jersey or, a North Carolina jersey or a Florida State jersey. In this case, Malik Cook has been a big priority for South Carolina. We know that North Carolina was strong for a while, and based on Tony Morell's report today, it looks like Florida State is still pushing. So, Malik Clark. Did I say something else?
You said Cook. Yeah.
Malik Cook. Yeah. So Malik Clark. So Alex, what's the latest on this recruitment? How do the Gamecocks feel, and what would he mean to South Carolina if he did commit?
Yeah, I think with Malik, it seems like they're got a lot of momentum heading into this commitment on Thursday. You kind of look at this recruitment. A couple months ago, you probably said it was a South Carolina, North Carolina battle with North Carolina having the lead. But now I think, Mike Fury and those guys have really made a strong push here and have put South Carolina in a really good position heading into this commitment. Kind of after that official visit, Malik said they kind of let him know where he stands with them being, number one on their board. So, I think that kind of resonated with him and, just the push they've made for him, and just if they land Malik Clark, what that can do for the class, that would put a cap on the wide receiver recruiting class, part of the class. You got Jaden Sellers, Brian Rowe, and those guys, I think with those guys and Lex Cyrus, I think that he really put the bow on that wide receiver class because that'd be one of the better wide receiver classes they've had around here in a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was 2007, and you had Deion LaCorn, Jason Barnes, Chris Culliver, Joe Hills. Those were a number of 4-stars, and Chris Culliver ended up being a 5-star on some sites. And, there were some questions if Chris Culliver was going to play offense or defense, and he ended up playing a little bit of both for South Carolina, but he's in the record books as a kick returner and a punt returner. So, yeah, I mean, I think, and, to Craig's point in the chat room, and I think Martin's in here as well, if they were able to land Malik Clark, that would be 3 4-stars. All of them very athletic, very quick, very speedy. And I'll still say Jaden Sellers is underrated based on everyone that I've talked to. So I guess, do you feel like it's a situation where it's Malik Clark or bust at wide receiver for the Gamecocks going forward?
Maybe they may kind of wait to see if they don't get Malik Clark. They may kind of wait to see who pops up with senior year film. But, I think kind of when you kind of back to your point a minute ago when you were talking about this class, the big thing that stands out to me with this wide receiver group is just the speed. I think you like Cyrus' speed. You talk about Jaden Sellers. I know we talked to him at one of the camps, and he coming off that ACL injury, but said, I haven't lost the speed. I'm getting right back to where I was. But, I think that's a huge part of this wide receiver group is they're bringing in a fast group. And if Malik Clark commits to South Carolina Thursday, that's just another one that adds to the group.
Yeah, and with Sellers, I talked to a coach that's played against Sellers numerous times, a defensive coach that's played against South Florence a couple times here recently, and he just said, holy crap, the kid is fast. And I don't think that a lot of Gamecock fans really understand the level of speed that Sellers brings to this class. And on top of that, his hands. He's been catching passes from Lenore Sellers since he was born. I mean, pretty much when Lenore started throwing a football, Jaden was catching footballs from him. So one of the more underrated players in the class, in my opinion. The next one that I want to ask you about, and these are all upcoming commitment dates, 4-star defensive back, Kendall Daniels Jr. If you're on the Big Spur, you know that this has been talked about ad nauseum. Is this kid going to commit? Is he a welcome home? Where the Gamecocks stand right now with Kendall Daniels Jr. and what could he potentially bring if he does don the garnet and black?
Yeah, I think they're in a pretty good spot here. Kind of a little more than a week out before that commitment. With him, they've kind of been in a good spot with a long time with him. I think when you think of schools with him, or Virginia Tech and Clemson and South Carolina are his final three. And I think South Carolina's in a good spot here. We'll kind of keep tracking that up until that commitment. But just be another guy from the DMV or kind of the Virginia area where they've really started to look for prospects and gaining some ground there. But so if they found a way to pull him into on August 2nd, that would be another strong get for Carolina.
Yeah. And, with the final three of Clemson, Virginia Tech, and South Carolina, I think that, a lot of Gamecock fans might be feeling like, oh no, is Clemson going to come in and steal somebody? But, in my opinion, from what I've heard, it seems to be a South Carolina, Virginia Tech battle. I think that Clemson would love to take one from South Carolina if they could. And look, no disrespect to Kendall Daniels Jr. He's a heck of a prospect, top 100, top 150 kid. And, if he comes to South Carolina, that's just another kid that kind of spurned the hometown team and is making their way down to South Carolina. So real quick, Malik Clark, that is Thursday. Kendall Daniels Jr. is August 2nd. And then you got two commitment dates on August 3rd. We'll go ahead and start with 4-star defensive end, 5-star on some sites, Jared Smith. I know that, Alex, you broke some news that South Carolina was trending. And it's JC said the same thing on Inside the Gamecocks. And it seems like in the last week, 2 weeks, that, potentially Auburn could be trending here, maybe even Georgia. South Carolina kind of has the longest relationship, the best relationship over time. In my mind, this is a 50-50 coin flip. And it's probably either going to be South Carolina or one of Georgia or Auburn. But South Carolina probably will finish number 2, if not number 1 in this recruitment. What's the latest on Jared Smith?
Yeah, so obviously, as you mentioned, South Carolina was in a really, really good spot with him for a long time. And the question kind of was, being a kid that's from Alabaster, Alabama, what was Auburn and Alabama and the in-state school is going to do? And now we're kind of seeing Auburn make a pretty big push here. I think with this one, as far as South Carolina's side of things, like Sterling Lucas has kind of proven so far that he can win these type of battles, and we'll have to see. He went and got Dylan Stewart, and think of a team like Ohio State was really coming after him. A guy like Des Yu, the class before that, and then he really helped out with Nick Harbor too. So he's won his share of battles, but we'll have to keep tracking this one. But it seems like maybe a little bit of a 2-team race here coming down to it.
Yeah, I think it's a 2-team race, and I'll just go ahead and say that there are lots of twists and turns that happen when a recruit sets a commitment date. There's the whole saying, who's been the closest with him the longest, who has the best relationship with him. And I don't think there's any doubt that's South Carolina. I don't think there's any doubt there. And normally when a kid sets a commitment date, he normally knows where he wants to go. And knowing that this was a commitment date that was set a week or 2 ago, it's one of those things where, maybe South Carolina has to hold on, or maybe, there's going to be some conversations that happen behind the scenes that say, okay, I might want to come here. I think I want to come here, but you got to make the NIL deal where it might need to be, because when you're talking about a high 4-star, a 5-star kid, NIL always comes into the conversation. So we'll see what happens with Jared Smith. The last commitment that's upcoming is also August 3rd. August 3rd could be a really big day for South Carolina. I think that Coach Beamer has his media golf event that day as well. So we'll see what Coach Beamer's doing that day on the golf course. He's probably going to have his phone to his ear the majority of the time. So, Alex, I'm sorry, you might not get a lot of FaceTime with Shane Beamer on August 3rd. But 4-star offensive tackle Jalen Gilchrist up in the Maryland area is set to make his commitment on August 3rd as well. Where do you think the Gamecocks stand here? And again, what would that mean to this commitment class if Jalen Gilchrist decided to come to South Carolina?
Yeah, when you kind of look at South Carolina's recruiting and who they've been recruiting, it seems like Jalen Gilchrist has been the guy they've been on the longest and kind of at the top of the list for the longest. I think Lonnie Teasley and those guys over there have built a really strong relationship with Jalen. As far as who else is pushing, I think the biggest maybe threat to South Carolina right now is Maryland. Seems like they've made a pretty big push here. And so I can see it coming down to those two. And, I think South Carolina's been in good standing for a while. And, I think that is going to continue, and we'll see kind of how it shakes out.
Yeah, I just did some math here before we came on the show, Alex. And right now, South Carolina has the 28th best commitment group or recruiting class in the country. If the Gamecocks were able to find a way to land all 4 of those players, and as we just talked about, it's not a 100% sure thing with any of the 4.
No.
But if they were able to land all 4 of them, they would have 236.45 points in the class calculator, and that would be good for 16th best recruiting class in the country. So if you're a Gamecock fan and you've been wringing your hands over all the 3 stars that are in this class, there's potential to get 4 more 4 stars and potentially a 5-star there as well.
Yeah, if you can land
the next coming weeks.
Yeah, if you can land those 4, that'd be a great way to kind of, I guess, wrap up the summer recruiting before the season gets going.
Yeah, and talking about wrapping up summer recruiting, the Cookout is coming up, and I don't know if you pay attention to this, Alex. I mean, what am I talking about? I know you paid attention to it, but there are changes to the NCAA recruiting calendar coming as soon as next year, I believe, where July would be a dead period. So obviously South Carolina's had these July cookout events for a long time. They've usually been pretty good to the Gamecocks, not only with kids they're recruiting for this upcoming recruiting class, but also future kids. Alex, what's your take before we talk about the Cookout on what that could mean for South Carolina? You're bumping up that recruiting calendar a little bit, and you're going to be competing with a lot of teams around the country to get kids on campus for an event like this.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest key right there is it just make it even more competitive to get kids on campus. I think that would be a huge part of that. And, it would be a battle. You think about some of these top guys like a Jared Smith or somebody like that. Like these guys are going to be, their phones are going to be blowing up, seeing where they're going and all that. It can be crazy with this new rule.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we get back, we're going to talk about the Cookout coming up this weekend and see what kind of nuggets Alex has for us.
I said, oh, Lord Jesus, it's a fire. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Emergencies and accidents happen. When you're in the middle of a fire or water event, all you want is for things to return to normal as soon as possible. Resto Pros of the Midlands is with you. RestoProsMidlandsSC.com. Open 24/7 when you need them. Quality that is guaranteed.
Down here in the South, we don't always see eye to eye. While our taste in college football teams, or what sauce, if any, goes best on a rack of ribs, or what to mix with our Dixie vodka might be up for debate, we can all agree there's nothing better than a Southern tailgate. And like our favorite college teams, our ingredients come from small towns and big cities. They're grown in Southern soil, are crafted by Southern hands, and proudly represent the South in our backyard and beyond. So raise a glass of Dixie Southern Vodka to celebrate being made in America and raised in the South.
Oh, man, the building is on fire.
During and after natural disasters or accidents, there can be a heavy loss to property. Resto Pros of the Midlands is here to help. Open 24/7. Call them when you need them. 803-493-0170. RestoProsMidlandsSC.com. Quality that is guaranteed.
All right, and we are back. Again, this is the Late Night Gamecock Show. It comes to you on YouTube every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Alex Jones is with me. Again, my name is Matt Anderson. Happy to have you guys and gals in tonight. When we left off just a moment ago, we were talking about the upcoming Cookout. We talked a little bit about how the recruiting calendar will change next year, but it hasn't changed yet. So looking at this Cookout this weekend, Alex, it looks like the Gamecocks will have 11 of their commitments in town. We're going to go through those names really quickly here. 4-star defensive lineman Caleb Williams, 4-star defensive lineman Jaquavius Dodd, 4-star offensive lineman Shed Surratt Jr., 3-star quarterback Cutter Woods, 3-star defensive lineman Kobe Sakia Pra, 3-star athlete, probably going to be a linebacker, maybe offense at South Carolina as well, Jaquel Holman, 3-star defensive back Christopher Hatfield, 3-star tight end Preston Douglas, 3-star linebacker Donovan Darden, and 3-star defensive end Anthony Addison, and then Kyle Farrow, who I believe, is he a long snapper?
Yes.
Alex?
Yeah.
He'll be in town as well. So, one of the big deals for all these cookouts and these types of events is just getting the commitments together, letting them bond a little bit, talk about the vision for South Carolina long term, how they all fit. And then what people don't realize is these commitments come together and they say, okay, who else are we going to get? Who else are we looking at? And all these kids put on their recruiting hat, and it's a really good thing for South Carolina and any school that has a cookout like this. As far as 2026, there are going to be 2 commitments in town as well. 4-star linebacker Rodney Colton Jr. and 3-star offensive lineman Anthony Baxter. And then as far as 2026 targets that we know about right now, 4-star wide receiver Jordan Gidron, who is a top 40 kid in the country. 4-star cornerback Samari Matthews, top 70 kid in the country. 4-star safety, top 90 kid in the country is Jazavion Currents. And then unranked safety Tamarion Watkins, unranked wide receiver Ryan Mosley, and unranked offensive tackle Zion Giles, I believe. So kind of light on 2025 uncommitted players at this time. But as we know that this list will expand, there will be more players that pop up. But what I've been saying since last year when I started this show is these cookout events are really big for the next recruiting class. When you get these kids in early, you make sure they understand that they are a priority for you. And right now, Alex, just talking about the 2026 guys that are not committed, Jordan Gidron, Samari Matthews, and Xavion Currents, all, national type players. And as far as I understand it, South Carolina might lead for all of them.
Yeah, and kind of going back to what you said about kind of what the cookout is, you mentioned the 2025 guys, and yeah, it's a big chance for those guys to kind of move back or get back in together and kind of, as you said, put the recruiting hats on. But yeah, these events are huge for these future classes. I think with the 2026, you think guys that you mentioned right there, like the state seems like it's going to be really, really deep with prospects this next class, and they're bringing in, as of right now, bringing in a lot of those guys. Gidron's a guy who's going to be one of the top wide receivers in the country, and is going to be, just a guy who's got great size and he's really, really quick. He's also going to be at Big Cat weekend too at Auburn the next day. So, these guys are going to be making the rounds, but it's huge to get these guys in over the summer, kind of continue building their relationship with not only their position coaches, but, other recruits and those commitment guys, the 2025 guys, they're going to be putting their recruiting hats on and getting to work on those guys too.
Yeah. So as far as Gidron, Matthews, and Currents, where do you think the Gamecocks stand right now? Do you have any idea if any of these kids might be on commitment watch? Are they going to be, taking the long way around and just trying to see everybody this summer and, go on visits this upcoming season? Or do you think there's a chance that you see a 2026 welcome home this weekend?
Yeah, you really never know with these events. I'm not going to say I'm going and expecting anybody to commit, but you really never know because, as you mentioned earlier, there's still going to be more names that are going to be added to this list. But, I think it's going to be a big weekend for South Carolina just from a future class building standpoint.
Yeah, and with these unranked kids, Tamarion Watkins, Ryan Mosley, and Zion Giles, they might be unranked right now. But at the same time, South Carolina has been pretty good at uncovering diamonds in the rough. And then before you know it, Georgia's offering, Florida's offering, Tennessee's offering. These kids are obviously invited to this cookout for a reason. Do you have any idea about these 2026 kids that are not ranked currently? Have you seen any of them so far this season?
Yeah, so I saw linebacker, or actually the recruiting as a safety, Tamarion Watkins. Saw him, I think it was May. They had like a Rock Hill City show, Football City USA showcase, and that's the first time I saw him. He goes to Northwestern High School, and you kind of saw him, and he kind of stood out just physically. He's like that. You kind of looked at him and thought that guy could be a player, and then he comes to camp and really kind of impresses the coaching staff and Torian Gray specifically, and lands the offer. And I remember him kind of talking to him after. He's like, "Yeah, wasn't really expecting an offer, but he looked really, really good out there." And I think you mentioned Gills was the other one that you asked about.
Yeah, and then Ryan Mosley.
Oh yeah. So with Gills, he South Carolina offered him early June, and one of those things you mentioned about how these guys are going to rise up the rankings, I think he's going to be one of those guys that can do that. Coming out of Carver's Bay, it seems like he's really starting to rack up some offers. And with Mosley, it's going to be interesting to see, kind of how his recruitment evolves here after coming out to camp. We'll kind of we'll get a better read on where things stand coming out of this cookout.
Yeah, it's funny, Alex. I think back to last summer when I was covering this and I was talking about the cookout, and I was talking about during the season, all these players that were coming to South Carolina on unofficial visits. And I remember telling everyone, look, these guys are unranked right now because they're 2026, they're 2027, and nowadays you're going to see the 2028 kids be coming out to unofficial visits. And just always keep an eye on the kids that are unranked right now, but SEC teams are inviting them to different events because, it, Alex, it's impossible for all the 24/7 guys, the on-3 guys, the rival guys to see kids that are 3-4 classes in advance. They just can't rank them. There's no point in ranking them. Let them mature and develop. But I think that when you see these kids come to events like this, they're someone to circle and keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier, they're not inviting them to these kind of cookouts and things for, no reason. These are guys that they have their eye on and kind of, want to continue recruiting and eventually hopefully add to the class. And there's probably still going to be some guys too that pop up. A guy like Tamarian Watkins is a guy who, was kind of under the radar until he came to camp. So there's always going to be guys that pop up under their radar.
Yeah, so like I always tell you guys at this point, and guys and gals, at this point in the show, if you're not a member of thebigspur.com, go ahead, subscribe. It's going to be a fun weekend to follow everything. We're, 9 or 10 days away from fall practice starting, 30-ish days away from the start of the football season. And there's no better place on the internet to find Gamecock recruiting and Gamecock sports information. And John Whittle has been absolutely tearing the cover off the baseball in his baseball updates here lately. And even though baseball season seems like it's a year away, it'll be here before you know it. And there are a lot of things changing right now. Really quick, Alex, before we move on to the next part of the show, Martin asked, any update on Isaiah Hammond? I don't even know who that is. Who is that, Alex? Do you know?
Yeah, here, I'm going to pull up his profile real quick so I make sure I give all the right information.
Take your time. Take your time. This is live. This is live TV, everybody.
Yeah, well, if I can pull it up, it's not working. But yeah, he's a guy who will be in this weekend. I kind of mentioned with him for another guy, I think he's going to be one where get a better idea later this weekend on where things stand with him. I kind of a guy, you think on that defensive line, I think with him and Travian Robinson, kind of still early in that building relationship stage, but we'll kind of get a better feel this weekend.
Yeah, so Martin, if you're not on the Big Spur, make sure you're on the Big Spur because Alex will have that information, and Hale and John Whittle and JC and Tony and all the guys on the Big Spur will probably have some more information on Hammond here coming up. But changing gears, Alex, this is something we have not done before, the two of us. We are 6 weeks away, or 6 shows away from the start of Gamecock football season. So we need to start previewing this upcoming schedule. So the first game of the year is, I believe it's August 31st. It's against the Old Dominion Monarchs. Looking at Old Dominion, Alex, I know you've had some articles up on the Big Spur previewing the schedule. So you probably know a little bit more about Old Dominion than I do, but let me tell you what I know about Old Dominion, and then you can fill in any gaps.
All right.
So in 2023, Old Dominion went 6-7. In 2022, they went 3-9. And in 2021, they went 6-7. So, looking for their first winning season in, 4 years coming up. The head coach is Ricky Ron, 5th year, former offensive coordinator at Penn State. He was the offensive coordinator at Penn State in 2018 and 2019. before accepting the head job at Old Dominion. The offensive coordinator is Kevin Decker. He's in his second year. He was previously the offensive coordinator at Fordham. And the defensive coordinator is Blake Seller. He's in his fifth year. So he came with Ricky Rain. He was defensive coordinator at Kansas State in 2018 and inside linebackers coach at West Virginia in 2019. And their special teams coordinator is Kevin Smith, 6 year with the program. So Ricky inherited him and has kept him around for the last 6 years. On offense, they returned 6 starters from last season. On defense, 4 starters. So returning 10 of their starting 2020 or starting 22. Looking back at last year, some notable games. They lost at Virginia Tech 36-17, lost to Wake Forest 27-24, lost to upstart James Madison 30-27, and then lost to Coastal last year 28-24. In 2022, they did beat Virginia Tech. They won that game 20-17, lost to East Carolina 39-21. Lost at Virginia 16-14, and actually beat Coastal Carolina at Coastal. They won that game 49-21. I know that they're returning their quarterback from last year, and their quarterback actually played at Fordham under the current offensive coordinator at Old Dominion. They lost a lot of guys on the team from last year, especially wide receiver, running back. They've got a couple transfers that have come in. What's your take on Old Dominion? I will tell you that the first 4 games of their season are at South Carolina, East Carolina at home, Virginia Tech at home, which I thought was kind of weird. I don't know why Virginia Tech's going there. They have a bye week after Virginia Tech, and they go to Bowling Green. So, Alex, what's your take on Old Dominion? I think the line right now is 20.5, 21 points, over under 55-ish. So I'll let you run with it.
Yeah, I think kind of the big thing when I was looking at their stuff for the article I did on the website, when you looked at them offensively, it was a little bit of a struggle last year, averaged 23.8 points per game. And I think that was towards the bottom of the league. And one thing that was really kind of, I guess, caught my eye when I was looking at their stats, that they gave up 62 sacks last year, which was the most in the league. And I think that was about 5 a game. So that's an area when you look, I guess when you're looking from South Carolina's side, I think that could be an area that they could win a battle there in that defensive line, kind of getting after the quarterback. As far as transfers, you're always, I guess, at this level, at Old Dominion's level in the Sun Belt, you're going to see some guys kind of move up or move around in the transfer portal. You mentioned Grant Wilson's coming back, but they, did lose Kadarius Callaway, who was their top running back. He transferred to Cal. They also lost their second leading rusher, and Keyshawn Wicks, who he's no longer with the program. And they did bring in a Rutgers transfer, Aaron Young, so he may be one of their top guys to kind of keep an eye on. At wide receiver, Raymelo Murphy, he transferred to Arizona after, I think he had like a little over 500 yards last year. But they got a guy, Kelby Williams, coming back at wide receiver who, was probably their number 2 guy. And so they have a little bit coming back there, but, I think the biggest thing offensively kind of going from there was just, they could not protect Grant Wilson at quarterback, and could be a place that South kind of thrives at week 1.
Yeah, they returned 33 career starts at offensive line. 2 guys that kind of were on the offensive line last year. So we'll see what happens there. I mean, look, I don't want to spend too much time on Old Dominion. I'm sure that there's some defensive stuff we need to talk about. But for me, I would be hard pressed if I was a gambling man not to lay the 20.5 points as it stands right now. We'll have full season predictions and we'll talk more about it in depth. But, with Old Dominion specifically, I think the Gamecocks should roll there. And I think that this could be Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders kind of coming out party in South Carolina uniform. So anything else you really want to talk about with Old Dominion, Alex?
Yeah, I think defensively we need to point out their linebacker, Jason Henderson. He's a guy was a second-team All-American guy who he had 170 tackles last year. So, I mean, he's a guy who kind of does it all for him. I think, and I got his stats right here. He had 170 tackles, which was 14.2 a game. He had 19.5 tackles for loss. He's 6'1", 227 pounds. I think his 14.2 tackles led the nation. And then last season he had two performances where he totaled 16 tackles twice. He had 17 tackles 3 times and also had a 22 tackle performance against Coastal Carolina. So that's a guy, like, he obviously is really, really good, and will be interesting to keep an eye on him.
Yeah, and just thinking about him, you kind of wonder how he stayed at Old Dominion and didn't enter the transfer portal. When you hear those kind of stats, they're eye-popping at any level.
Yeah, really.
So we'll have to see if the Gamecocks can find a way to get to that second level on the offensive line, maybe get some guys thrown his way, because he sounds like a one-man wrecking ball crew.
Yeah.
So the Gamecocks open up against Old Dominion. That game's on August 31st. Hey, Rebecca, I see in the chat, I'm not that quick on numbers, but I think 31 plus 8 is 43-ish. That's how many days until football season. So 42, 43, give or take. But August 31st is the first game of the season, and that's against Old Dominion, which we just talked about. All right, so the next team we're going to talk about, we're going to do 2 teams a week going forward. And we're kind of getting to the meat and potatoes of the schedule right now. And unfortunately for South Carolina, it is another difficult schedule when you think about Old Dominion being one of the non-conference games and then Clemson being a non-conference game as well. Kentucky, and I agree with Craig, Craig says the Kentucky game is the biggest game of the year, in his opinion. Alex, do you think it's the biggest game of the year?
I mean, I think it's right up there. I mean, when you think about what could happen in that game, say South Carolina wins that game and they start 2-0 to the season, that's obviously a great start. It's not going to be an easy game for them because Kentucky always, at least defensively, is ready to go at the beginning of the season, always has good defenses. But, I think, Kroger Field there is going to be they're going to be won this game for Kentucky. And, I think it's a huge game for both programs.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, and I'll go through some of the same statistics and coaching information and all of that I just went through for Old Dominion. But Kentucky in 2023 was 7-6. In 2022, they were 7-6. 2021, we all remember that was Kentucky's double-digit win season, 10-3. Looking at notable games for Kentucky over the past couple of years, starting last year, they beat Florida 33-14. They lost to Georgia 51-13. Lost to Missouri 38-21. Lost to Tennessee 33-27. Lost to Alabama 49-21. Lost at South Carolina 17-14. Won at Louisville, which was a top 10 win when that happened. Won that game 38-31, and then lost to Clemson in the bowl game 38-31. In 2022, they beat Florida again 26-16. Lost at Ole Miss 22-19. Lost to South Carolina 24-14. At Tennessee, they lost 44-6. At Missouri, they won 21-17. They lost to Vanderbilt in 2022, 24-21. Lost to Georgia 16-6. Beat Louisville again 26-13, and then lost to Iowa in the bowl game 21-0. And then going all the way back to 2021, they did have a win against Missouri, 35-28. They beat South Carolina 16-10. I know a lot of Gamecocks are still punching their TV screen at that game with old offensive coordinator Satterfield. That was a brutal one to watch. They beat Florida, which they have a 3-game win streak over Florida. They've won 20-13. Beat LSU 42-21. Lost to Georgia 30-13 on the road. Lost to Mississippi State 31-17 on the road. Lost to Tennessee in a barn burner 45-42, and then beat Louisville, another three-game streak. They won that game 52-21. And it was weird. I didn't remember this, but in 2022 and 2021, they played Iowa in their bowl game in both matchups. And in 2022 or 2021, they beat Iowa 20-17. So I guess what I'm looking at, Alex, is the trajectory of Kentucky. And we all know that Mark Stoops flirted with Texas A&M. Texas A&M rioted when they thought he was going to be the next head coach. So 10-3 in 21, 7-6 in 2022, and 7-6 2023. South Carolina has started to right the ship against Kentucky, winning the last 2 games. Obviously, this year the game is at Kentucky, second game of the year. Mark Stoops is 61-39 in his last 8 years at Kentucky. I did not realize he was doing that well. New offensive coordinator with Bush Hamdam. He was the OC at Missouri in 2022 and Boise State. He was there last year. Defensive coordinator Brad White's in the 6th year, and special team coach Jay Boulware he's been in Oklahoma, Auburn, and Utah. So, Alex, looking at Kentucky, they returned 8 starters on offense, 10 starters on defense, and for my money, I think that Kentucky is just a line of scrimmage team this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you think about the line of scrimmage, the first guy you got to think of is Deion Walker, the defensive lineman. I mean, I remember watching that guy really all season, but then, that South Carolina Kentucky game, he was a problem. He's going to be. I think I've seen him listed as one of the top, defensive linemen for the draft, and maybe even potentially a first-round pick. So South Carolina's definitely going to have to count for that guy. And I think with Stoops and those guys at Kentucky, it seems like they always have a fairly solid offensive line. I know recently they kind of, maybe taken a step back from where they have been. But, yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, it seems like it's going to be a line of scrimmage game in week 2.
Yeah. In Kentucky, they're calling their offensive line the Big Blue Wall, and they have a reason for it. A lot of starts are coming back on the offensive line. Defensive line is, Kentucky just plays scrappy, man. That's the best way I know to explain it. And JC always talks about the spider web, and Kentucky just wants to kind of lull you to sleep and then Black Widow bite you to beat you at the end of the game. Brock Vandagriff, transfer quarterback from Georgia, now at Kentucky. You saw what happened with Will Levis becoming a first-round pick at quarterback when he transferred from Penn State. Then you saw Devin Leary. I can't remember where he came from. I think it might have been like Penn State or something.
NC State.
But NC State, yeah. So Devin Leary, didn't have a great year last year, and now they're going to roll with Brock Vandagriff. We'll see what happens. We don't know enough about Brock Vandagriff. We know what his recruiting tape said, and we know what his stars said. But, with a new offensive coordinator, is Kentucky going to push the envelope offensively? Or are they going to get back to some of the Will Levis, like just let arm talent work out? Or what do we know about Brock?
Yeah, I think we'll find out a lot week 2. It'll be Kentucky's first SEC game, both teams first SEC game. So I think we'll find out a lot, not only about Brock Vandagriff, but about both of these teams in week 2.
Yeah, I think it's tough for South Carolina to have to travel to Kentucky. We remember 2 years ago when South Carolina traveled to Kentucky, Will Levis was banged up, did not play. South Carolina got up, it seemed like 14-0 or 14-3 very quickly in the first quarter, and it kind of became a defensive slugfest the rest of the game. Looking at the running back room, they do have an Ohio State transfer in Chip Trayanum. So he's a 5th-year guy coming from Ohio State. We know Dane Key at wide receiver is a pretty good target, and he actually kind of flirted with entering the transfer portal, and I think South Carolina would have been interested in Dane Key. Defensive line, Phil Steele ranks this group as the number 9 defensive line in the country. So we're going to see what South Carolina is made of, because the offensive line is going to have to stand up to help Lenore Sellers in this game. And South Carolina is going to have to find a way to score efficiently and effectively. And I just don't think it's a good recipe for South Carolina to get down 10-0 or 14-3 in the first quarter, first half. And I could very easily see that happen for South Carolina in this game. But thankfully they have Old Dominion to start the game, and it's not playing against North Carolina where, some confidence can get shot. But, go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say, let's say both teams are 1-0 heading into week 2. What do you think the line would be? I know it depends on how both teams look in week 1 and all that, and there's still a lot to find out, but what would you think?
Well, okay, Kentucky opens the season against Southern Miss, then they play South Carolina, and then they host Georgia and then host Ohio. So their first road game is not till September 28th, which is at Ole Miss. So, yeah, there's no sleeping on South Carolina when you have Georgia coming to town the next week. Assuming South Carolina takes care of business and covers a spread, and Kentucky beating Southern Miss. I don't know how good Southern Miss is right now. They're obviously a name. Brett Favre went there. We know that. But I don't know, man. I would say something around the line Kentucky -4.5.
Yeah.
-3.5.
I was going to say 3.5 to 4.5. Somewhere in there.
Yeah. If South Carolina beats Old Dominion by a score of, let's just say, like 41-17, and then Kentucky wins 30-0. which, is very realistic for a game like that against Southern Miss and South Carolina against Old Dominion. I think that public money would still be on Kentucky, even though South Carolina has won 2 in a row. I think the biggest thing to talk about is Mark Stoops and Shane Beamer clearly have some type of beef. I don't know where it started, how it kept going. I know that Mark Stoops has talked about, Shane and his stupid sunglasses, and, Shane keeps receipts. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that'll be a topic whenever that game comes around. You obviously you're not going to get many answers out of them in a press conference setting, but it's always interesting to kind of watch that dynamic these past 2 years, especially at starting last year after all that.
Yeah, I don't think that South Carolina would be favored, but let's just say they're plus 3.5, plus 4.5. And look, I do have a vice. I do like to gamble on college football. It just makes the Saturday more fun, whether it's $5, $10, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I would be very tempted to take South Carolina in that situation, especially getting the hook, whether it's 3.5, 4.5, 4. I'll be really interested to see. And Alex, maybe that's what we should do this year. Every week we'll pick 3 or 4 games. I used to have a betting segment on the show last season. We might have to have a little betting segment where we pick spreads, but I think that'd be fun. And then look, follow us at your own demise.
Yeah, right. There we go. We got a new segment coming up for the season now.
Yeah. So, well, we appreciate everybody hanging out with us tonight. We're going to get out of here, but what are the next 2 games on the schedule for us, Alex? I need to pull it up. So we have LSU and Akron. So it's going to be pretty similar. Probably a lot more conversation about LSU than Akron, but hey, I was just playing College Football 25 and I simulated a game against Coastal Carolina and South Carolina lost. So we can't take any of these games for granted.
Golly.
It ruined my perfect season. But anyway, we appreciate everyone for listening. When you spend time with us on Tuesday nights, you give us the most valuable thing you have, which is your time. And we're very thankful for that. And we always promise to deliver you the best content we can. If you have any questions, you want to reach out to us at latenightgamecockshow@gmail.com. You can reach out to me there and I'll share everything with Alex. And on the Big Spur, we reach out to either of us via direct message or even just post something in a thread and we'll make sure we get back to you. But we're so excited. We have some big things planned for the next 5 episodes before we get into the meat of the college football season. Hopefully to have some fun guests. So we appreciate all of you for listening. And Alex, is there anything that you want to get out before we call it a night?
I think just keep tuned to the Big Spur. We got a big weekend coming up with camp on Friday and then the Cookout. So just stay tuned. We'll have all the info there.
I love it. Well, everyone have a great rest of your evening. Have a great rest of the week. We will see you on Tuesday, and hopefully we have some commitments to talk about soon. But we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.